Good evening. It is 6 o'clock on November 13th, and I call this regularly scheduled Dunwoody City Council meeting to order. Unless there's an objection, seeing none, this meeting is called to order. Councilwoman Harris is participating remotely. And with that, Councilman Lautenbacher, can you lead us in the invocation and the pledge, please?
Yes. At this meeting, help us to make decisions which keep us faithful to our mission and reflect our values. Give us strength to hold to our purpose, wisdom to guide us, and a keen perception to lead us. And above all, keep us charitable as we deliberate. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Last week, one second, Chief. Last week, our community lost a fearless young woman named Rose Lubin, who had made Aliyah to Israel right after she graduated from Dunwoody High School. She served as a soldier and was serving as a police officer in her role as a soldier, as a border patrol officer, and she was killed by a 16-year-old terrorist. Rose was truly a Renaissance woman. She wrestled, she was a cheerleader, and she played flag football. She was beloved by everyone who knew her. She was brave. Rose was courageous. She was a friend to all that she met, and bright and intellectual, and had known since she was a little girl that she would spend her adulthood in Israel. It was tragically cut short, and I'd like to ask in honor of her memory that we take a moment of silence in Rose's memory, please. Thank you. Now, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to ask Sergeant Leach and Sergeant Phila to come forward if they could. As all of you know, but it's always a good reminder, the City Council supports officers further in their education by providing funds for tuition reimbursement. And these two gentlemen here has taken advantage of that. First, to my right is Sergeant Jeffrey Leach. He recently earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Central State University. And then next to him is Sergeant Anwar Silla, and he recently earned his associate's degree in criminal justice from Georgia Military College, and he will continue his studies at Georgia Military College in order to obtain his Bachelor of Science in criminal justice. I know these gentlemen do, but the entire department certainly appreciates your support of the officers continuing their education. And we always like to bring those officers to the council meeting so you guys can see that the money that you're spending through that is being used by our staff. And we're very proud of them. So I'd like everyone to give them a big round of applause. If either one of y'all like to say something, you're welcome to, or you don't have to. Right here, right here. You want to say something?
Thank you.
Maybe you want to come down and maybe get a photo real quick. Yeah. Y'all have anybody here?
I'll do one with just y'all.
Sure. The Mayor asked me just to talk a minute about the importance of education. And certainly, it is important. The citizens of Dunwoody are a very educated populace, and it's important that the police department represents our community in all kinds of ways. And one of those is through education. And it helps also to be highly trained. Today is a challenging time to be a police officer compared to when I started, over 40 years ago. And so education is a vital tool and a vital piece of that, the ability of an officer to provide the services that they provide today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Back again. At this time, I would ask Officer Teresa Hernandez and PSR Adria Crum to come up. Come on, up there would be great. This is our officer of the quarter, or for the third quarter, and employee of the third quarter. And you've probably seen both of them around the police department a lot. And so I'd like to go over just briefly what caused them to receive this award. First is Officer Teresa Hernandez, standing next to me. She recently joined in May the community outreach unit. We had an opening there, and she was able to move in that position. And she's done a fabulous job serving in her role. And unfortunately, we ended up she had to serve alone in that role for some period of time due to unforeseen circumstances. And she took over the Citizen Police Academy class in the middle of it and did a fantastic job. She's also organized a number of other events that we haven't participated in previously, such as the NAMI Walk and other things that really is getting us connected with our local community, which has been fantastic. Officer Hernandez also does a lot of things as far as lunches, dinners held by the public, and often visits local schools and nurseries for career days, read-alongs, or even just to visit and chat with students. So she's doing a fantastic job as a fantastic representative of our department. And tonight she's being recognized as our officer of the third quarter. So let's give her a round of applause. Standing next to her is PSR Adria Crum. She works on the day shift, and I get to see her every day she's working. And she always has a smile on her face and a positive attitude when she's serving the citizens of Dunwoody. And y'all may not know, but that's probably one of the most stressful jobs there is inside our department, especially for civilians, actually answering the call and dealing with all the people who come up to the front desk, because a lot of them, frankly, are not necessarily happy that they're having to be at the police department. But she serves them with a smile on her face and always makes sure her work is done and helps out the other shifts with their work. And we're excited to have her as our third quarter employee of the quarter. So let's congratulate her. And I have their things here. So that's to you. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you.
And of course, we appreciate everyone in the back who serves our community so well on a daily basis. So thank you. Next up is public comment. Ali.
Good evening, City Council. Wanted to come and give you some feedback on the recent elections as well as just a random tangent. So first, congratulations to all of you for getting reelected. Even the ones who did have opposition, it seemed like it was kind of a slide. So that's fantastic. And I think ultimately, at least talking to the city residents of the city of Dunwoody, that's fantastic. I mean, it's positive. What's going on in the city of Dunwoody is positive. Walking around, seeing the stuff with High Street, seeing how kind of in the last couple of years, you guys have transformed Dunwoody, moving it in the right direction with all the progress in light of COVID, in light of high, incredible inflation, in light of almost every cop wanting to resign. So for that, I think the elections really speak loudly that the confidence and just the the trust in the integrity of the city council, what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing. It is good. Now, of course, you'll always have your residents who think that there's a genie and a flying rug in the back of city hall or whatever that can do some things. But for the most of us, we understand that with the resources, the information you have, and the current climate, you're doing a good job. That stated, the bond referendum in the recent election did fail, and I think that was something that it appeared that city council might have wanted or might have favored. And just so from a citizen's standpoint and citizens' feedback of that, that was kind of honestly very confusing. I think the education and just kind of discussion portion of that might not have gone the way we really needed it to. I mean, even for me, I was really confused. I had that confused with some of the stuff going on in the regular budget. There's other things that are just kind of confusing in there that didn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, in itself, for example, if Eric walked up and he said, I got 10 seconds, hey, bond referendum, the sales tax thing, good stuff, good things are coming out of there. I think, at least for me, I would trust that he understands what he's doing. He knows the climate. He's done the homework. This is something good. Based on a 10-second conversation, that's probably all I need to vote something. But again, on this particular subject of the bond referendum, there's just a lot of confusion. A lot of stuff that was jumbled in together. I mean, one thing had something about like $900,000 for police radios that didn't really even make any sense. And I was just sitting there like, how many bat signals could we buy with $900,000? But a lot of different aspects of it were just a little confusing, didn't really make sense. The idea of parks and recreation is fantastic. I don't know anyone who opposes coming to some of these meetings, apparently some people do, but the idea of parks, the idea of trails, all of that seems good. I would kind of like to push city council to continue moving on that, not to violate the vote, but I'm saying to move in different directions and trying to figure out how we can continue moving in that direction. Because the idea was good. I just want to say politely, I think the communication or the way it was explained might not have been the best for some of our citizens, including myself, to really kind of understand. So that was just my general feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom Taylor. And if anyone else wants to speak, the cards are on the music stand behind at the back of the room. 3 minutes, sir.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Well, okay. I want to honor Beverly Wingate, who passed away. I was out of town at the time, but John and I served on a lot of boards with her. Just a lovely woman, intelligent, just looked after the community. And just, it's a sorrowful loss for me because she was one of my best friends. And just, we served on a bunch of boards together. She just was behind this from the beginning at the effort, and just want to say I'm very sad. That's that. Switching gears, bonds failed, and I'm going to reflect the same thing the gentleman before he said. Communication was terrible. No specificity. You're asking people to pony up a lot of money for something that you couldn't identify, couldn't quantify, could not put, this is this project. This is project A, project B, project C. And that's why it failed. And it's a lack of trust. And I think that comes mostly from staff, not from council. But when you say, we're gonna do this, this, and this, and you don't, it fails. And I'm kind of glad it did. That's all I got to say.
Tom, we honored Bev so lovely yesterday at the Veterans Day ceremony, or Saturday. I just wanted you to know that she was behind all that. And she's the reason we have a Veterans Day ceremony. So she will be greatly missed. Okay, Eric, City Manager's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the report ending November 10th, 2023. In the Parks Department, we have on December 1st, the Holiday Lights opening night, and that runs nightly from 5 to 10 o'clock from December 1st through the 31st. Also, on Two Bridges Park, we did have one other enhancement we did to the drive lane there at that property, and also to the island. If you remember the island in the main road, there was, in existence already, and it interfered a little bit with our driveway. So that's cut back, and then the driveway is finished with a new artwork in the middle of the driveway to celebrate the entranceway to the park. We also have the Georgetown Gateway. Final paving has been completed north of Chateau Drive. They're also making preparations for some other road work after Thanksgiving near Cotillion. Will be a 2-week lane closure in that area. Just want people to be mindful of that during that construction phase. The gateway signs that we're putting up throughout the city, the contractor has submitted the sign to the fabrication. Plans have been submitted as well for that, those to be constructed. Also on the great Dunwoody cleanup day, we had 23 groups participate with 115 total volunteers on that. Also, High Street is continuing its build out with multiple restaurant tenants ready to start construction for their individual tenant build out. And the work is making visible progress on Campus 244 on all components of that construction zone. The construction start for the office tenant build out is expected towards the end of the year. And then that will be occupied early or sometime mid next year. October 1st, we had the Community Development Department hosted the Household Electronic Recycling event. We had over 450 residents participate in that event. Also with Economic Development, we were working with Life South to install a mural on the retaining wall along the Ashford Center Parkway, and also working on the site selection for the Dunwoody swing sign along Ashford Dunwoody Road. We'll present that once we have more of a location picked out. December 1st marks the 15th anniversary for the city. So we'll have whatever, all the citizens to know that, and we've been in existence for 15 years. And also within communications, we're working with the Atlanta Magazine to develop a perimeter special section in the December edition of that. And there's a little blurb, you'll see it within your report of what that will look like. Under information technology, Ginger LePage obtained her national certification, Certified Government Chief Information Officer from the UGA's Carl Vinson Institute. Once again, we want to celebrate our staff, and as we mentioned earlier by the chief, as far as the education within the city is very important, and Ginger has received her certification. Within the police department, the department is hosting the Civilian Response to Active Shooter event, CRAZE course, on this Thursday, the 16th, from 6:30 to 8:30 here at City Hall. When you read through the police report, you'll see we did conduct a distracted driving detail in the perimeter area. We had 6 citations, including 6 citations for a hands-free violation. I believe those numbers are coming down some, even though we still do have quite a few distracted drivers, but hopefully over time those will diminish. As you'll read, like I said, this report, there's quite an extensive history of what has occurred within the city. And if you'll notice, one of the latter points or in the report talks about the, we did have a police chase and a officer involved shooting that occurred from a, basically a hit that we had on the flock system, and some investigative work by our police department discovered the stolen vehicle and with a wanted person, and that we were able to apprehend that person inside the Brookhaven city limits. Under finance, you'll notice that we do have the monthly report. There's a link for that report here. I believe Richard is here as well. If there's any questions that we have on that report, he'll be glad to answer those. And you'll notice out front, two things I wanted to point out. One was, which is not in the report, but is the ambulance we had out there tonight with DeKalb County and AMR through a partnership the city of Dunwoody has created, where the city has contracted with DeKalb County to have that ambulance, and that will serve Dunwoody exclusively. It's a Dunwoody only ambulance, with few exceptions, but it will be here. And it is a brand new unit, and we did have it out front for the council and the citizens to see before the meeting. We also have 9 new Ford Explorers in the parking lot that the police recently received. Those have been added to our fleet. Those will be on the road very soon. They have been, it has to go through a lot of different preparations for those to be ready for service. They have their decals. They're awaiting their lights and sirens to be installed in those units. Municipal court, the department disposed of 688 cases last month and reset 41 cases. And as the council knows, we did have our board appreciation dinner last Thursday night, and several people from the courts and some of the judges were there. Very great group to really keep our cases moving and serve the public in a very efficient manner. Under human resources, just as an employee things for the public to know, our open enrollment process was ongoing. It actually ends today. And then the city filled our prisoner transport officer. So we do have a new prisoner transport officer now, which helps the police department overall, because that person can run inmates back and forth between the jail and court as needed as well. So that concludes my report. I'm glad to answer any questions council may have.
Stacy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I had a question for Chief about the Raven devices.
Yes.
Chief, I noticed there's in the report, there's lots of calls where the Raven device went off and alerted our officers, but then nothing was ever found and no 911 call was in addition to it. I guess my question is, how does the Raven device help if we're not finding anything? And you see, do you understand what I'm asking?
Well,
I mean, they're going there and they're not finding anything, so it's taking time away from from other places.
Well, we go on a lot of calls where we don't find anything when we're dispatched to them.
Okay.
We still go on the calls in case we can find something. In one particular case this month, officers were in the area and heard the gunshots about 30 seconds before they received the Raven alert. So in some cases, like we've seen so far, we're not finding the evidence of it. Could be somebody stepped off their back porch at one of the apartment complexes, fired a gun in the air 3 or 4 times, and then went back in. The chances of us finding them are probably slim in those situations, especially there's a lot of apartments over there. But what this will help us with is when there is something more involved, when somebody is shooting at somebody else or 2 people are shooting at each other, and we'll be able to more triangulate exactly where they are. And we can get in the general area, but also the fact that no one's calling 911, I think for the calls are fairly typical from what I've heard from other chiefs where they have this technology deployed. I was at a meeting in Columbia, South Carolina, in their emergency operations center, and they had the gunshot detection similar to we do in one particular area, and they had it in this area where they have a lot of crime. And they said over the course of the year, they had 5,000 gunshots detected. And 95% of those, they did not receive a 911 call, only about 5% of the time. And, but it helped them in a couple of cases because they were able to, I think somebody ended up being shot. They were able to, and everybody ran, but they were able to locate the shell casings. And, you know, when we recover things like shell casings, we can enter them into a database that'll help us identify the gun if we ever find it.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that explanation.
Sure.
And while you're up there, I just want to say thank you to the officers for their patience with dealing with the junior senior wars, pranks that went beyond pranks. And I think a lot of what our officers did went above and beyond their duty. So please give them our appreciation and thank you and thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm good, Lynn,
Okay.
Mayor.
Anybody else? Tom?
Yeah, Chief, why don't you stay up there? And this is really not necessarily a question, just more of a PSA. I saw one of the things in the police report was about someone selling a Rolex, and a lot of people do online sales, whether that's Craigslist or Facebook
Sure.
Marketplace, whatever it is. And this is a ripe opportunity for people to be taken advantage of or victimized. And if people are engaging in this type of transaction, they can do it right here at City Hall,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. The best place is at the police department, City Hall. Certainly, unfortunately, we have unscrupulous people who prey on people who are trying to sell stuff or, potentially buy stuff from someone else. And in the instant you're talking about, the subject had met in a bank parking lot off Chamblee Dunwoody to sell a Rolex. And as soon as the guy got the Rolex in his hand, he took off running, and the victim chased him. And then there was an accomplice there who fired a couple of rounds at the victim. The victim had a gun. He fired a round back at them, and apparently nobody got hit, but the people got away with the Rolex. And so probably the moral of that story is, come to the police department and meet here. If they're interested in trying to rip you off, they likely won't do it in the parking lot of the police department or City Hall. Good point.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else down here? Rob, you okay? Okay. Joe?
Eric, thanks for the report. And I also just want to let folks know, under the parks, there's a CPR class offered this Thursday night, CPR and AED course at the North Shallowford Annex. It's at 7:30. You can register there on the city's website for Parks and Rec, and I intend on taking it. Thanks.
So Chief, I'm really sorry. I thought people would have more questions. There was a reference or two to the practitioner. We have our co-responder. And I'm wondering when we can expect maybe some data to make, like if we need to make a change, if we need to talk to DeKalb Community Service Board about making him full-time here. And then if that's a possibility, which they may say no, but if it is, I'm wondering if we can morph his role to also help us deal with some of the challenges we're facing from the people who are homeless.
Sure. He does deal with some of that right now. We do make referrals to
Right.
him.
Okay.
I can come back maybe by the
It can be next year. I mean, we're
next
down
meeting,
to
or
2,
maybe
right.
in January, come back with a report for the
Right.
last part of the year.
Yeah.
And provide some numbers and things like that. I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I don't know that the one day he's working at Doraville
It's maybe-
is really
okay.
interfering with anything. So,
Okay.
but I'll be happy to provide that report.
That's fine. I'm just wondering, as we move to next year, I think we need to talk about what is changing and how we can support people and how do
Sure.
we can, like I spoke to one today and, he says he's talked to DeKalb and that's some of the mayors are working on that too, to get DeKalb because
Sure.
it is DeKalb Health and Human Services that should be helping us. So,
Okay.
all right.
We'll do that.
And then to Stacy's point about the junior senior prank disaster, I would call it gently this year. I sure would like to see if we can't stop it from happening next year, that even if the people choose not to press charges, that we encourage them to at least require because they often know the children, right?
Sure.
children is generous. The teenagers, they know them, they're kids' friends, and so they don't want to press charges. But I think they should have to come back and clean up. I think there should be some consequences. And so obviously we have almost a whole year to focus on it and talk to the school administration, but there should be consequences. So especially the kids who were particularly destructive,
Right.
who went way above what you would consider a normal junior, senior prank. So I appreciate the officer's patience. Clearly, if you followed me on social media, did not share that patience. So anyway, thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Eric. Next up is the consent agenda. Anybody have
Move to approve.
moved by John,
Second.
second by Joe. Stacy, I'm sorry. Did you have any questions? Okay, anybody? All right, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Raise your
Aye.
hand so I can see Stacy. That's unanimous, Sharon. Thank you. And I guess, Sharon, I can keep going because there's no action items. All right. Jonathan, are you here? Did we get there too fast? Yep, okay. Can't actually see anything on that side of the beam or much of that side of the beam.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jonathan DeJoya, Safe Streets Program Manager for the City of Dunwoody. I'm glad to be back here with you all to share some updates on the Safe Streets program since the last time I was up here in March of this year, right around the time that I started. So since then, I've been able to hit the ground running on several different initiatives. One of those is being kind of a point of contact for all road safety related needs. Many of you have forwarded communications from residents to me, getting various communications from people, being able to respond, being able to coordinate among city departments on opportunities to take action. We've gotten to take action in a lot of cases and have thankfully some great completed low-cost projects over the course of since March this year. One being the Vanderland Drive sidewalk extension. We heard some concerns about children walking to school in that area, mixing with traffic on this one block where there's no sidewalk, and working with the Public Works Department, who ultimately completed the project, was able to extend that sidewalk and close that gap to serve the children walking to both Vanderland Elementary School and Dunwoody High School, which was very cool to see that completed in a short period of time. Also at Brook Run Park, received some concerns about, again, children mixed with traffic kind of in the area around the soccer fields where there are a lot of people driving, dropping off children, driving kind of fast through the area, and worked with the Parks and Recreation. And actually Parks and Recreation was able to take the lead on completing a quick construction project to build a crosswalk connecting the shared use path over to the soccer fields entrance, and also signage and speed humps to help make the crosswalk more visible and encourage safe speeds through there. And then finally, the pilot project that you all are aware of recently completed on Womack Road. We're able to quickly respond to concerns in that area with kids walking to school and crossing Womack Road, and addressing pedestrian visibility in the area. Even though that pilot session has ended now, we're now taking what we've learned from that and being able to apply it forward toward some other longer term solutions in that area. So just a few of the things we've been up to. Although I will say now a major focus of the Safe Streets program so far has been on developing the road safety action plan, which is what we're here to present to you tonight. So this plan is both a roadmap for us toward reducing and eliminating severe injury and fatality crashes here in Dunwoody. Just really finding a path forward to helping everybody get home safe at night and get home to their families. That's what we're trying to do here, and improve quality of life and economic competitiveness. So, and what this also will do for us is position us for the opportunity for future federal funding, competitive federal funding through programs like the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which would also allow us to implement even more of our Safe Streets opportunities. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce to you Byron Rushing. with Tool Design, who will be presenting the plan to you tonight.
Hang on just a second. Let me make sure I figure this out. Great, thank you. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to work on this important project. This has been my first project as project manager with Tool Design, and it's really been a treat. I'm a Marist High School graduate, and so the walk and then later drive up Ashford Dunwoody from campus to the mall was a formative part of my teenage years, and to get able to come back and revisit and look at that again as an adult with fresh eyes was really formative again to me in my career. So thank you for the opportunity. I'd also like to give a brief thanks to Elizabeth Shin, one of my colleagues and Dunwoody City resident, who's very helpful on the project, and Hillary Essig, who was not able to be here tonight, but my deputy on the project, who is a Dunwoody native. So we had a lot of local folks contributing to this, which is always rewarding in our line of work. I'm going to talk through the details of the plan. Jonathan gave a great overview, and we've enjoyed working with him on this. If I'm talking too fast, let me know, or if we need to pause and ask questions, I'm more than happy to. The Road Safety Action Plan is a format that's going by several names right now nationally: Safe Streets and Roads for All, Local Road Safety Plans, iterations of the same kind of thing. Road Safety Action Plan is emerging as a title that we've seen in a lot of cities, but the underlying mission of all of these is to save lives. And it's very fundamental that when we look at traffic safety, as Jonathan said, help people get home in the evening is so critical and important. Beyond that, I'll go into how we're doing that a little bit, the high-risk roads and the community priorities. But underlying that, safety should never be the first conversation we have. It's unfortunate when we do have to have conversations about serious injuries and fatalities, but really what we want to be doing is contributing to the growth of the city, the priorities of the citizens, and safety should be a non-issue for people as they travel around the city. And so really, as we seek to go forward and help implement a plan like this, that makes a big difference. And as Jonathan mentioned, one of the core elements of the Road Safety Action Plan was to align first with federal safety programs. I'll talk about the SS4A program in just a moment. The Atlanta Regional Commission's Regional Safety Strategy, ARC, gives out about $70 million in transportation funding every year, and this is consistent with the way that the MPO looks at funding. And then finally, with Georgia DOT funding and policies, Dunwoody's a little bit unusual in not having very many state routes within the city, but Georgia safety money is accessible to all local roads, so it's important to be consistent with the state and the way that they're viewing safety. I've mentioned SS4A twice now, and it's a federal discretionary grant program that was established under the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. In 2022, the first year, it gave out $800 million to over 500 communities, and they're stepping that down a little bit. The 23 funds of $82 million just came out a week or two ago. And importantly for Dunwoody, the 2024 NOFO or funding opportunity is going to open in February. So this plan is arriving right in time to make the city eligible for those funds. I'm not going to go into eligibility, but the way that the federal program is structured, a local city must have a compliant SS4A plan to come back and apply for infrastructure. And as far as we can tell from our national experts in our firm, this wholly qualifies. And we did something a little bit different in the plan document. I don't know if y'all have been provided with a copy yet, but if you have one in front of you, just after the introduction, we put the SS4A criteria in there and use that as a table of contents or an index. So that if somebody goes in and says, how is this consistent with the federal program? You can jump straight to that page. All of the SS4A program and the work that we are doing nationally is aligned under the safe system approach. And I won't get into all the details, but the core element of safe system and the SS4A program is to eliminate fatal and serious crashes. And we'll get into the numbers in just a moment, but there are a lot of traffic crashes. We should be worried about all of them, but we should be the most worried about the ones that result in either a fatality or a life-altering injury. So we take the focus on killed or serious injury crashes, KSI as we call them, very seriously. And the national safe system approach under the U.S. Road Safety Strategy has 5 focus areas: safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, post-crash care, and safe roads. For this road safety action plan, we've focused on roads, speeds, and behaviors first and foremost. Those are the 3 that are most in control of a local government. safe vehicles are a little bit outside of y'all's purview. And post-crash care is handled through other means. So we focused on those three primarily, with a few recommendations for all five. I'll talk through briefly stakeholder engagement. Dunwoody is a wonderful city to work in because y'all citizens are very engaged and they were very eager to talk to us at every opportunity we gave them. We started with a safety working group, 3 meetings of community, business, agency, and city neighbor leaders, perimeter CIDs, residents from the neighborhoods, police department, and lots of other folks were involved in those, and we're very thankful to their contributions. We had 4 stakeholder interviews where we could go a little bit deeper. We opened up kind of an open conversation for an hour at a time to get more into issues with residents and local business leaders, and collected pages of notes from those. And then finally had 3 really wonderful in-person engagements at Lemonade Days, Food Truck Thursday, and a Spanish language event that I'll talk about in just a moment. And this is on the screen is Hillary Essig, local Dunwoody native, who was up here at Lemonade Days and Food Truck Thursday, talking to residents, gathering ideas, and documenting concerns. I want to pause and really talk about the Spanish language night or transportation night that we conducted with Corners Outreach. I've been doing this work for over 15 years now, and I think this was probably one of the most productive and rewarding public meetings that I've had. Corners Outreach was tremendously generous to donate their staff's time and their venue to a conversation with an insurance company who's providing information about how to get insurance and access that system. And then we really had the floor for the better part of an hour to have a conversation about traffic safety entirely in Spanish. And our colleague came up from Orlando to help us do that. And it was really an enlightening and thoughtful conversation from a portion of the community that we don't get to hear from as often. And we're really glad that Dunwoody gave us the opportunity to do that. We're going to take that forward into work we do on other projects. The bulk of the engagement really came through our online sources. We had an online map that was posted open for the majority of the project. We got 366 entries from 248 individual users. You can see the stats on the page. But importantly, the comments came from all over the city. So we got portions from every corner of the city. And it really gave us both the good, the bad, the highs, the lows, the concerns, what people loved in the city and what they wanted to see changed. And the results are here. The words on this are a little bit small, so I'll read out the top 3. First, lack of sidewalks, poor condition of sidewalks. Second, street design that encourages speeding, and speeding comes up frequently. And then poor visibility at intersections or crosswalks. And it was a little unclear if that was geometry or lighting or something. So we got into the comments a little bit more where we were able to. And then down on the list of typical transportation and transportation safety concerns. But this really fed into the data portion and really supported the work that we saw in the crash reports. So the crash data, we looked at 5 years of crash data, 2017 to 2021, which was the most currently available at the time when we started the project. We looked at every crash report for the city at the time, 5,541 crashes of any type, of any severity. And then importantly for this study, 45 killed or serious injured crashes, KSI crashes in that mix. So 5 years is very typical. It's a common way for us to bite off traffic safety data and look at a breadth of information over several years and hopefully smooth out some of the inconsistencies. 17 to 21 obviously was in the middle of a fairly big societal event that occurred, and the pandemic did have an effect on that. And we're still processing that in all of our studies all around the country, what 2020 and 2021 mean for traffic safety. So reaching out a little bit beyond those 2 years and gathering more years was really important. And we feel very confident in the consistency of the data for that. Probably more important than the big numbers are how we start to break that down into problems and challenges that we can address. So I think the great news for Dunwoody is that total crashes are on a slight downward decline over those 5 years at least, but KSI crashes are on a fairly sharp uptick, and we're seeing more severity both in Dunwoody, the Metro Atlanta region, and the country as a whole, really for a lot of reasons that we're still continuing to unpack and try to understand better. But those 2019, 2020, and 2021 years are slowly ticking upwards and need to be mindful. So even as we see progress in all crashes and traffic safety nationally, the upward tick in KSI crashes is something that needs to be kept in mind and addressed. Looking at crashes by mode, all crashes by any mode are largely cars, vehicles. But when we look at severity in those fatal crashes, vehicle crashes are still 80%, but pedestrians and motorcycles jump up in that number and really start to move to the forefront. I think thankfully for Dunwoody, there was no bicycle fatality or serious injuries during those 5-year periods, but that's certainly the additional mode that's not shown on the severity chart that we should keep in mind moving forward. As we start to break out the types of crashes and the locations of crashes, functional classification, the way that engineers grade or score the roads in the city, local streets are relatively safe. And then as we get a bigger road, we see more severity up to arterials, Ashford, Dunwoody, Chambly, Dunwoody, and several other streets in the city funnel in that arterial class. If it's 45 or posted higher than 25 or 30 miles an hour, it's more than likely an arterial. So
Right.
go
Can
ahead.
you help define, because you
Yes.
hear this, even for me, the difference between a collector arterial part 1 and part 2, is it just arbitrary colors? There's no meaning between the colors, you just had different colors in these.
No,
Right.
that was the wind.
I was looking for a legend to see what does green mean? All right, anyway.
That was just a different shade.
Okay, thanks. So can you give us a quick, what is Mount Vernon? What is Happy Hollow? What do we call those? Is it arterial or collector?
What is Happy Hollow? Does anybody
I
know?
mean, I'm just throwing out,
Collector, yeah. So Mount Vernon arterial, Ashford Dunwoody arterial, Happy Hollow collector. So essentially the way that the road system is talked about is that as you leave your driveway onto a local street, if it's a cul-de-sac or a very small road, that's a local road. And as you go down your trip and journey towards the interstate, each road you turn onto becomes a higher functional class. And functional classes increase by speed, they increase by volume, and as a result of those, they increase by width or dimensions. So the bigger and the faster the road gets, the higher the functional class is. And that's very important because number of lanes and speed are great predictors of both the occurrence of crashes and the severity of crashes. So functional classification is not the contributing factor. It's a correlation between the description that we use. But what it's really saying is the more lanes there are, the wider the road is, and the faster the road is, the higher risk it is. So, and we'll come back to a map in just a moment. All right, all crashes by severity. This is a daunting map, but it's a good one for looking at distribution in the city. Black dots are crashes of any type. Red dots are very severe crashes. And I won't read the stats, but they're on the page. And probably what's most important, and I think the most important element from our study in the report is taking all of those red dots and boiling them down into what is the smallest portion of the city streets that account for the most number of crashes. We call that the high injury network. So the high injury network represents 84% of all serious crashes and 9% of city roadways. So when it comes time to think about where you're applying transportation projects, safety projects, applying for grants in the future, the high injury network are the places where you have the greatest opportunity to make significant change in the smallest amount of space.
I do have a quick question about the stats, if I could. I know I-285 is not included, but is it included in any of the accident counts?
Apologies. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So we excluded 2 roads, I-285 main line. We included the interstate ramps and the adjacent streets like Cotillion Drive that serves as a adjacent proxy to 285. But we excluded the I-285 main line and the Peachtree Industrial Boulevard main line. Because
okay.
Either
and so those were excluded not only from the study, but from the accident counts as well.
So those are excluded from all numbers in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And I'll pause here because this is a very important map. And so we pulled out both the high injury network, the number of roads that account for the most serious crashes, as well as the top 6 intersections on the high injury network. And then briefly, we also looked at equity. It's very important for, sorry.
You go back to the last map. So I just have a quick question and you may not be able to answer it, but like at Tilly Mill and North Peachtree in the last year or so, because time changes, we did a major intersection improvement project there. Did anyone break? It was 6 years ago? Seriously? Never mind. Time feels like just yesterday.
And that did come up about there's no good way to break.
Yeah, then that's
we unfortunately cannot pause all city activity for 5 years while we have
no, but it's
but it did come up, and it's going to be something to look at. And it's one of our big questions in our firm is how we start to track and evaluate progress, and looking at those projects and starting to look over the next 3 years and then 5 years as the city makes any sort of change, how that's affecting traffic safety.
Right.
And we have an evaluation component built into the report. So I'll move a little bit quickly from here. Our equity analysis SS4A program nationally requires a focus on equity. We pulled out Atlanta Regional Commission's their equity methodology, which looks at concentration of federally protected classes based on race, income, languages spoken, and a few other criteria, and map those. So the numbers are in the report, both for action on the city's part in terms of outreach, as well as reporting on federal requirements. From all of that data, the mapping data, the numbers data, we had a lot of different ways we looked at the data that I'm not including here. We boiled it down with the city staff's input into 3 safety focus areas for decisions moving forward. The first one is concentrating on collisions with vulnerable road users. Pedestrians are 13% of KSI crashes in the city, far and away the biggest vulnerable road user mode represented, largely consistent with the metropolitan area crash numbers. And in particular, I won't get into the stats, but the KSI rate, so the likelihood that any crash becomes a serious or fatal crash, pedestrians are far and away the biggest KSI rate mode, which makes sense. Humans are soft and squishy. When we are struck, it tends to result in worse collisions. Second is left angle crashes, and we can also refer to this as left turns. So left turns in big complicated intersections are far and away the most dangerous thing that any of us do on any given average day. And that's reflected in Dunwoody's data and Metropolitan Atlanta's data. So that was our second emphasis area. And then third emphasis area was speed and speeding. And that speeding also incorporates a lot of aggressive driving stats. The number is smaller in the crash reports because very typically that requires an additional investigation from a police officer or detective that they can't tell at the crash report at the scene where we were relying on data. But given national data from NHTSA, Federal Highway, and USDOT, and lots of research organizations, 30% on average of fatal crashes have speed as a contributing factor. So we pulled that in as a third emphasis area for the city to think and focus about. And then I will wrap up. I'm not going to go through all of the actions. We have several pages of them, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of how we're recommending recommendations. Oh, you have them in front of you. Excellent. So we pulled out 6 focus areas for the city. 1 are institutional actions to support internal programs and decisions. Second is citywide safety. So looking at the crash factors that we identified in the report, functional classification, speed, number of lanes, et cetera, and start to try to chip away at those individual risk factors. Third is focus on the high injury network, first and foremost, the section of roads that are most likely to contribute to serious crashes. Fourth is look at equity and how the city has conversations with people of all backgrounds in the city. Fifth is culture change and really starting to reach out to people in the city, students, visitors, other people who are traveling through the city, and make sure that everyone understands that Dunwoody is a safe place to drive, walk, or bicycle and should continue to remain so. And then 6th, focus on data and really starting to track evaluation and progress towards effective funding and effective actions. And you can see a snapshot in there. Each action has a label, a time frame, some broadly major needs if it's internal work or a partnership with another entity, if it would require legislation from you all at the city level, roughly how much funding it would take. And we had a very broad brush that we pulled from several other reports we've done recently. And then finally, whether or not it addresses one of those 3 very specific safety emphasis areas. And I'll end on this slide. We have a number of engineering recommendations in the report that'll largely be the purview of Jonathan and Michael and their staffs. But I wanted to land on this slide because I really love this picture of things that the city's already doing. Dunwoody's made so much progress since I grew up around here, and looking at these kinds of crossings. I love all the little details of this, but the high visibility crosswalk, the rapid flashing beacon, additional bike lanes, additional sidewalks. These are the kinds of things that have multifaceted benefits for reducing speeding, providing safe opportunities to cross, and safe opportunities for everyone in Dunwoody to travel around. So I think this is a wonderful slide to end on. And we also made it kind of one of the flagship pages in the report. So with that, I will pause and be happy to take any questions. And I don't know how y'all do questions, but I think Jonathan also.
Absolutely. John, you want to do your questions?
I'll start. Thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
Can we go back to the slide showing equity? I have a question regarding that. And the reason I ask is that, see the bottom right-hand corner, North Peachtree and 285,
Mhm.
that is a deep purple. What does the deep purple mean? I'll have you explain.
So that is a higher concentration of federally protected classes. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'll be happy to pull them out, but it's very typically race, ethnicity, foreign language speaking, and income, and then age, both older and younger. So it's some combination of those together.
Correct. And that is sometimes called underserved communities when it comes to federal funding.
Yes. Mhm.
When I look at that map, it actually cuts a community in half. That is, to the right is the back half of an apartment complex. To the left of that purple in green is still the front half of the apartment complex. Why did you cut an apartment complex in half? Are you saying that one half is underserved and one half isn't?
Absolutely not. So these are drawn based on census tracts. And so wherever the census tract boundary is drawn, that's where the federal census data is being pulled from. So for whatever reason, that census tract cut through the middle of that property, or if it was two properties, then it divided the two of them. So the nice thing about this is there's a lot of underlying data to this, so the city can always get more granular and look at specific parcels and parcel boundaries.
Again, knowing a little bit how federal funding for projects works, you have an underserved community directly abutting North Peachtree Road, which has a high incident, high accident, high injury location, which is then directly abutting a school, also in a pink area, which is an underserved community.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just trying to look at all the different
There's
projects.
something maybe wrong with this map because I think the green is really Dunwoody North. And
Well, both green
Yeah.
and deep purple
yeah,
aren't.
there's something
Sure, and we'll certainly double check that.
I'm
make sure
just
that's
looking
Right.
at it from
So-
different
that
perspectives.
doesn't make sense. I mean, I just,
How we go forward for any grant opportunities.
and I think it's this, you know what, I think it's the same census tract. So something maybe
Okay.
is just
All right,
off.
we'll double check that and make sure that
Thank
got
you.
coded correctly.
I can't
Yeah,
really.
I don't have any real questions. I'm just
Okay.
looking at North Peachtree Road, underserved community, abutting, high level underserved communities. And to me also with a elementary school, that jumps out at me. And again, the question regarding the deep purple versus abutting a green when it's all in one
So-
one apartment complex, I have questions.
I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to. We have one qualified census tract and it's not on here. Like well, I'm not very good at maps, but it's where PIB is. Is that the purple? But it's on the other side of Tilly Mill. I don't know. It feels like. Where is Winter's Chapel on this map? I see Winwood Hollow. Yeah, I guess it's. Okay, something feels off. It's not as intuitive as, maybe it's just me, but it feels like you're on Tilly Mill and you. Peeler, okay, okay. I don't see the waterworks. Oh, I see it, okay. Okay, yeah, there's something, the apartment I mean, unless this is maybe just really, that whole purple is the apartment complex that John was talking about. There's something out of whack, because
Okay.
something, so anyway, okay. Have any questions or comments?
We'll definitely double check this.
Thanks. Hey, so thank you for bringing this here. I really am pleased. I want to say again, another pinch me moment about the role of public safety is job number one for being on council. Great to see this. I do have just some broader questions about some ideas about the next steps, of course. And let me just throw a couple of just miscellaneous stream of consciousness kind of conversation. Real large cities like Atlanta would actually have a roadway design manual. I don't see us needing that. Do you see us needing any kind of, as a result of any of these actions, do you see us having some lower level specificity on, like, we have roadway design for certain zoning, right? In the perimeter district, in Dunwoody Village, we have streetscape standards and so on. Getting into the nuts and bolts, do you see a part of that as an action item as well, of having a little more specificity in a design manual regarding a lot of these different, features, attributes, the whole matrix on all these different countermeasures and so on?
Yeah, so we made a few recommendations in there, and I think it would be up to the city to decide if you needed a whole design manual. We made a few very specific recommendations about places to look for either expanding complete streets language, looking at speeding and traffic calming. And then we also did a fairly thorough review of all the city's policies going back almost to incorporation, trying to find those specific elements where either proven safety countermeasures, complete streets elements, or some sort of policy lever was mentioned to try to bring those forward and give them an examination. So I think on the whole, Dunwoody's covering a lot of the bases already. There's a few places that could be tweaked or strengthened, but in general, there's a lot of pieces there, shy of going to a full, as you mentioned, a full blown.
I noticed in that
City
reference list of all the different plans and stuff.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and add our complete streets policy that was adopted back in 2011 or something too. It wasn't on the list, but we
Okay, we'll-
did have one on the books.
We'll double check.
Specifically. I got a crazy one. How do we close curb cuts? Do you see any municipalities going there voluntarily closing curb cuts? Because you said intersections are where crashes happen. We're about ready to look at the Village Crossroads corridor, ARC grant between, Chamblee, Dunwoody, between Womack and Roberts. Be a great opportunity to close some of those curb cuts. I'm just asking you, what have you seen out there, other municipalities in Georgia, or best practices of you negotiating with that landowner, right? Because they have a property right.
Yep.
Do you see any successful practices of closing curb cuts?
Yeah, so access management is always a daunting conversation, so always a big hurdle to climb. But it is recognized as one of Federal Highway's proven safety strategies for addressing a number of different crash types. And we've seen, I won't say success, but certainly a lot of opportunities to follow and examine and learn lessons from in different cities. Both on the big streets, Beaufort Highway, obviously a big conversation around access management and curb cuts, down to smaller cities and a lot of LCI cities and LCI programs who have done that successfully. So
Yeah, it's like in our methodology, when we go to construct, we'll do the right of way easement or construction easement, timber easement, start moving utilities. I'd love to see you way up in the pipeline early on. Let's start negotiation with some of those property owners to get some of those curb cuts. Now, the plan when adopted, some cities were before us that had these plans, and early on that got this Safe Streets for All federal grant. Who were the couple of the big ones? I think Atlanta got one from Moreland or something that was like in the tens of millions.
30 million, yeah. So Atlanta's Central and Prior SS4A implementation grant was the largest in the country under the first round for 30 million. Yeah.
Right. That's quite a lot. And then I just overall, and I look at these implementation processes, I want to make sure that we have some kind of a follow-up. I notice you have a column that's called legislation, and I don't want to go through each one that says legislation, but when I see legislation, that would imply it's up here.
Yes.
Right. So I think I don't want to go through specific items, but it's about the follow-up, right? Of these action items, who by name, who would be owning these items, especially the short time frame and the low funding items, right? So the quick ones, I'd like to know, or if we have person's names. I know this isn't a plan document, but there's got to be an action document too. So I would love to find out when we take next steps after we adopt the plan. Then let's get some names and who's taking action and what we're going to do. You mentioned there's some low level things that can happen over the next 2 years, right? So 2024 through 2026. So I'd love to get that annual report. I love the measurable monitoring implementation here, seeing that. So again, it's all about the follow-up and taking next steps. So it's like the project manager me is like, okay, let's put names of people following up. And then once a year, I'm assuming that our staff, after you all leave, is going to be presenting to council. Here's some more metrics of what we're doing. But all right, anyway,
That's my perception.
yeah, perfect. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm just glad to have this out here. And then, yes, of course, selfishly, it'd be great to get some federal funding and submit that application as soon as we can. Thanks.
Catherine.
Hi, did you work at ARC
I
before
did
this?
for 12 years. Yeah.
I thought so.
Appreciate it.
Well, this is very, very readable and thank you. Great ideas for us. I've got a couple of questions on some action items that you notice as emphasis areas. So S2, it's incorporate NACDO design guidelines into city standards. Are you saying that we are currently not doing that?
I'll ask the city staff, do y'all have NACDO adopted yet? With my license.
Yes, we're already doing that. And when we do a RFP for transportation design project, that's usually one of the ones we list as a reference to go by for the design.
Okay, that's good. So we already have a little disconnect on what we should do and what we are doing. Is that what it sounds like? If you're already doing it, we don't have to do it.
We'll double check the action item and make sure that reads.
Okay, so
proactively.
S3 is seek state approval to adjust speed limits. Are cities doing this? Are they one by one asking the state for changes to the speed
Yes.
limits?
Mhm.
And are they getting it?
Successfully?
Not very often,
Right.
but there can always be a conversation with GDOT about how to proceed on safe speed setting.
Wish us luck. Okay, so did you want to say?
Just is MUTCD going away with the 85th percentile?
Great question. We don't know yet. We should know later this year or early next. So when the next manual comes out.
All right, S7 is identified criteria for systemic application of low-cost intersection modifications. I am hopeful that's what Jonathan's doing. right?
Yes, that's his program.
Okay, so we should be seeing that right away. And then H3 is mark crossings consistently along the high injury network. That sounds like paint. Is that what that is? Just generally marking crossings?
Yeah, so making sure, so starting with paint. So it could be paint up to high visibility treatments, rapid flashing beacons, pedestrian hybrid beacons, depending on what's necessary for the location. But starting with the marking and making sure that it's visible, because there are a number of legal crosswalks that are unmarked.
Okay, so I've got to encourage staff that we got to get on that. We got DeKalb County Schools to paint a crosswalk within a couple of days. So I feel that we're way more responsive than that. And I hope every crosswalk is painted immediately. I think those are the big action item questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very
Of
much.
course, thank you.
Rob,
I think I have more big picture kind of comments and questions. I love all the maps. I love data visualization. I think that really helps. Looking at map 1, which is kind of all the crashes and by severity, I think it would be great. And if we could see where the city has roads that have sidewalks and multi-use trails overlaid with that,
Sure,
I think that could help us identify where we need to build sidewalks
sure.
as priorities. And if you look at the high injury network, that kind of overlaps the priorities for where we're thinking about trying to get multi-use trails in. But I think that will just kind of help inform those decisions of where can we try to pull cyclists and pedestrians and kind of the most vulnerable users off, arterials and connectors, and then even just neighborhood roads where people are driving in and out. Maybe we need to put some sidewalks in there. So that's just, a thought with that. And then the other thing I'll just point out is on page 5, we commit to 0 KSI by 2034. That's 10 years. So we got some work to do, I think, if we're gonna pull that off. So I like ambitious plans. I like data visualization. And I think, this needs to be a major focus of our retreat next spring and kind of how we're going to try to start prioritizing some of this work to make the city safer for our residents.
Okay.
Kat, I'm gonna go to Stacy, sorry.
Okay.
Stacy,
Hold on.
you're muted. Stacy, you're muted.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
you're unmuted.
I guess I want to go down a little bit deeper and kind of piggyback on Catherine's questions, because I kind of had a lot of the same questions. So like with, I think it was S2, I mean, we're already doing the NACDO design. So I guess my question is, how do we take this document from you guys and marry it with what the city already does? And then in something like S3, where we seek stake approval to adjust speed limits where context justifies lower speeds, we know we've already done that on a few roads. So are you guys giving our staff saying, we think you guys should apply to the state for lower speed limits on these roads? Like, that's a great action item. Are we already doing it? Have we already done it on some? And what exactly of information are you giving our city on specifics, not just a general big action item? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, so I might invite Jonathan up to speak to that as well too. So we wrote, we pulled out action items that we see as successful as approaching those 3 emphasis areas. And bounced them back and forth with the city staff several times. Some of them are ongoing items. Some of them are things that the city is in process doing and should continue to do. Some of them are big ideas like adjusting speed limits and going to the state for those. In terms of specific data, I think everything should be in there, but I'll certainly double check for the speed question.
Well, when I'm talking about specific data, I'm talking about specific locations in the city. Like you think we should do blah at the intersection of X and Y.
We did not get down to that level of detail in every case, but we certainly included a few of the key ones on the high injury network that were prominent.
Can we go back to that high injury map, please? Okay, so. And I guess I'm just not seeing it in the report. Maybe I just missed it, but so like Chamblee, Dunwoody, and Mount Vernon. What are some specific ideas, action items that we can do to improve the safety of that intersection?
So I'll invite Jonathan up to speak to that. That was not the level of detail that we were getting to in the action plan. And a lot of those are going to be, especially for that particular intersection, are just going to be big ones that require ongoing study and research.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to hear maybe from Jonathan, like what are some low-hanging action items in the city that you guys are taking away from this?
There's a part of the report that's on the presentation that has kind of a toolbox for a lot of toolbox for specific emphasis areas for intersections. I think we can pull up the
PDF page 50.
Thank you.
Let's see.
You want to talk about these? Here you go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joe. So in terms of specificity, looking at those emphasis areas and specific the risk factors that we saw in the data and from national research elsewhere, pulling out those what we call proven safety countermeasures, the design treatments. We've talked about NACTO a little bit. NACTO is a slightly different guidebook, but it's an important one for the toolbox. But looking at those combinations of things that are in the national research and really as they get applied to locations make a big difference. So we have the focus corridors and focus locations. We did not peg specific recommendations to each location, but the toolbox is there for reference and city examination moving forward.
Okay, so then I guess my next question goes to Jonathan. When we go to direct action items and you're looking at the toolbox, are we going to see we're going to use this tool in this intersection? And will we know that and how that is going to be laid out?
I think it maybe depends on the context. Sometimes at some of the maybe the smaller intersection. I think there are some of these tools that can be laid out very systematically, intersection to intersection, and there are other ones that may be a little bit more location specific that may need a little bit more engineering design than was in the scope of the plan. But some of the things like leading pedestrian intervals, some signal timing related things may be a little bit more systematic if that answers your question, and then other things that maybe crosswalks or smaller intersections, like the consistency with just making sure that we have the crosswalk warning signs, the striping that's fully retroreflective and everything.
So I guess what I kind of want to know is if we take this plan, we adopt it, when are we going to see the results and the action items that you're doing from it?
Sure. And I mean, I think we have it varies by the action item, I guess, the short, the medium, and the long, and the goal would be, I mean, I guess at the speed of resources and funding, and we've got the timeline with the
If you go to page 59, it'll talk about next steps there.
Also, a
It
question,
does,
the page
yeah.
that you're on currently. If you could look at the page that you're currently back on before you move.
Sorry, John.
There we go.
You go back to page 50.
Page 50.
Yeah, for John.
So what's, I guess, to the rest of, what's our timeline on this? Like, when are we going to be doing this?
Stacy, I think that we have to, that's like a retreat question. This is a report. They're not, the consultants can't tell us when to budget and what to do, and I'm not
So
sure.
that is,
exactly
so
what
that's,
you're
we're
asking.
taking this and then city staff is putting together the timeline and the priorities. Is that correct? I
Right.
just want to make sure that I understand what this report is leading to.
Right. That is what it's going to lead to, is what we do next and
Okay.
when we do it, a list of priorities. And John, you had a question about this page.
Yeah, I'm looking at the focus corridors and locations, and I don't see North Peachtree listed at all. Can you tell me why? With the pedestrian counts that are,
So these were pulled from the, we had 5 maps that went into building that high entry network map, 1 for each mode. And for whatever reason, that road wouldn't have been reflected on the pedestrian high entry network map.
Right.
And that can come from any number of different reasons.
Right.
I'm just trying, so this one is not included. If North Peachtree is not on this list, for what reason again? I want to make sure I understand.
It wasn't reflected in the pedestrian fatal and serious injury numbers that we
Okay.
had.
Okay, so there's no fatal pedestrians in that area.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I will comment back up for just a moment. So this report comments on it, a plan to help guide the city in transportation decision makings. So comprehensive transportation plans, capital programs, grant funding. The road safety action plan will move at the speed that city decisions move elsewise. And these are data points that go into making decisions at all different stages and over time. And I think the mayor.
I just always like to know when stuff's going to be done. Everybody knows that.
Right. Is that it, Stacy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, before I get into some specific questions, I just want to make some general comments. Public safety is the number one thing that we do as a city. And let's make no mistake, this is a public safety issue. When people talk about public safety, they tend to think about badges or vehicles with flashing lights. But guess what? We can improve the performance of those if we can reduce the amount of times that need to be called by, we can reduce ambulance response times by not having to call them in the first place because we've done the right thing and protected our residents. So this is very much a public safety issue. And sometimes that gets lost in the conversation because there's been a lot of discussion in the community over the past couple months about trails. And I know this document is not 100% about trails, but we get into discussions about width and about this and about that. And what it boils down to is that people are dying. People are dying and getting seriously injured. And we need to take steps to prevent that from happening, or at least reduce the likelihood of that happening. So this is something that I take very seriously. I think it's very important for us to focus on and not lose sight of what this is all about. What all of these discussions that we've been having for months and months and months, at the core of it, it's about keeping our residents safe, and that's important. And so you pointed out in there, and just to point out, vulnerable road users, which of course are pedestrians and bikes and such, 103 crashes in 5 years, and of the groups, they're 149% higher than with the KSI than anyone else. And again, just to emphasize, sometimes we start talking in acronyms. We forget what those acronyms stand for. KSI stands for killed or seriously injured. That's not something, we start talking numbers, that's impactful. What I found interesting is that the total crashes were declining, and you talked about this a little bit, but the KSI rate was going higher. Is there any indication as to what seems to be contradictory? Why?
There's 2 theories currently. One is the overall increase in distracted driving that we've seen over the past decade at least. The recent trend that we've seen towards larger and heavier massive vehicles, giant pickup trucks in particular. But then for the brief moment that we're looking at for this window, the pandemic caused traffic to drop off. Metro Atlanta commutes are down, driving commutes are down about 10% or so over the past 3 years. And when commutes and traffic volumes drop, speeds increase because we have a lot of lane widths that people can go faster on. And so the moment that traffic volumes drop, speeds increase, then any collision that does occur is more likely to be severe from speeding as a contributing factor. And that's been well documented over the past year in several research reports. So we think for this pandemic moment, and things are starting to maybe bounce back a little bit right now, but less traffic, higher speeds, more severe crashes. tends to account for that.
Okay, I have a question on the equity analysis, and some of it's been touched on, but that section over in the bottom right corner, that's purple, the big purple box, that's basically Peachtree Industrial, Winters Chapel Road, which is, of course, one of those federal classifications, protected class. I'm surprised that there's nothing on the high injury network there, because if you go up to the crash, and maybe it has to do with the severity, but there seems to be a lot of crashes along Winters Chapel there, and at the intersection of Peeler, there was even a KSI crash. Was any of this, I know that along that segment of road, we share a rather unique border with the city of Peachtree Corners. Did that skew the data in any way? Like, were some crashes recorded in Peachtree Corners that occurred in that corridor that, like, these numbers might be higher than this reflects?
So we saw a little bit of everything. We saw responding police department vary by location. We saw crashes get coded or miscoded slightly on either side of the roadway, or even in the center of the road that was excluded from this. But then it's important also to look at the tool that we're using. If one KSI may not trigger a segment, we look at it in aggregate and over time, and we start to boil it down to not every segment that has seen a fatal or serious crash, but the roads on aggregate that contribute towards the most in the city. So the model that we use is intentionally a little bit less fine-tuned than any one crash can account for. And that gives the city consistency over years. When you go back and look at trends, you don't see peaks and spikes and things like that. We have very specific action items in there. And I think one really important one is for the city and the city departments to form a road safety committee internally. And again, this is one that's a continuation of a lot of work that's going on. It's a formalization of work that Michael and Jonathan and the staff already do. But to make sure whenever there's a fatal crash, staff go out and walk the corridor, look at the site, make decisions on that. And a road safety audit is the name we use for this. And I appreciate you saying we have a lot of terms and jargon, but road safety audit, essentially, if a fatal crash is reported, go out and look at the road and take engineers out there and say, what can we do differently? How can we make changes? Low cost term, aspirational long term, what can be done? So the high injury network just guides the city towards, when it comes time to write the CTP, when it comes time to apply for federal funding, those are the roads that get the first priority and first emphasis and first concentration. But every crash that occurs, severe or not, but in particular the severe ones, can be examined and looked at and scrutinized for change.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that corridor up is because that was the one that surprised me on the high injury network that didn't appear, because there are so many people that walk to the retail there, to walk to public transportation. And I just wanted to make sure that the data that properly reflected the reality, because I know sections of even the sidewalks in front of the apartments are actually in Peachtree Corners, even though on the Dunwoody side of the road, and we have a really weird border. So I just want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting what's really happening there, and that we're not shortchanging a segment of the population that might desperately need this.
Yeah, we'll certainly go back and revisit, make sure that all those are double checked.
Okay, go ahead.
But also one thing with risk and exposure, it's hard because with volumes of pedestrians, it can make things safer. It's not always a 1-for-1 that more people walking automatically result in more serious crashes. There's an element to that, and it is often the case, but not always. So we looking at the data and using a data-driven plan, we follow the numbers and we trust them where they lead us.
Okay, great. So going back to the high injury network, minus that one road that we just talked about, I found it pretty telling that, and Rob kind of spoke about this earlier, that the map there with all the yellow lines of the high injury network is exactly the map that we have been focusing as our priorities for trails in the city. So I thought it was pretty telling that maybe our hunches are now supported by data. Like, we identified, yeah, these are important areas, but now the data supports that should be a priority area. So I thought that was pretty telling to me. And sorry, I'm just trying to. So one of the things that you talked about too is road narrowing, road diets, narrowing the lanes, and a lot of that has speeding, I'm sure, is a major contributing factor to this, and you mentioned that. And there are things that we can do. Basically, we get the behavior that we engineer for. If you engineer for cars and to make it convenient for cars to drive fast, you get cars and cars that drive fast. If you engineer the roads to maybe calm that a little bit and maybe make it more pedestrian friendly, to your point, then you have less incidences of that bad interaction with cars and pedestrians. I know there has been concern, and actually I'm going to ask Chief to come up for a second, because one of the concerns that has been raised is obviously one, even if you don't eliminate crashes, you certainly by some of the stats that were in the report, reduce the seriousness of those crashes and the KSI number by reducing the speed. So one of the concerns, though, with reducing lane widths has been the ability of emergency vehicles to respond, to get through the traffic. So I'd just like to ask Chief, is that a concern of the police department? If the lane widths were reduced, will the police department still be able to respond appropriately?
Yes, we'll certainly be able to respond. Really the holdup in our response a lot of times is just motorists failing to yield to our emergency equipment on our vehicles, which has nothing to do with the width of the road. So I think we'll be able to respond fine.
Okay, I just wanted to check on that. And then this is the last thing on with the transportation stuff. I know this is seems to be a dirty word in Dunwoody, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that's roundabouts. One of the big areas is left turns, and roundabouts not only move traffic more efficiently, they reduce left turns, so they eliminate that safety issue, or I guess reduce it. I guess you can never eliminate it, but you're not making a left turn, so that kind of goes away. I know we have there's challenges here that other communities don't face with roundabouts, and the fact that they require a lot more land and that's becomes a lot more expensive to do that. But I would love if we could find an appropriate location through this process to give a roundabout a shot, and let's see what kind of impact it has on traffic, on safety, and maybe the fear factor will go away as well. Again, and I know that a big part of this is cost, that we just don't have the land to fit in roundabouts everywhere, but certainly I think they warrant consideration. So if we could somehow find an appropriate place to give one a shot, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and roundabouts are a rich topic of conversation, but the data is absolutely clear nationally, consistently, that reducing and eliminating left turns, and reducing and eliminating speeds through intersections make a huge difference in terms of severity, and communities adapt to it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed reading the report. A lot of good data in there, a lot of good information. So thank you. I look forward to putting this to good work.
So I have a couple things. One is that in the big report, there is detail on the high injury network that is not, or maybe it's not even in the network, but it's where the KIS crashes by mode happened.
Yes.
And it's different than the yellow lines.
Yes.
Because it is primarily in this area and towards the village. And so I think that's very interesting. I do think I applied for a program for mayors on pedestrian safety that I ultimately wasn't selected for. But when I answered the question about why, whatever, my answer was that all of a sudden we had people walking in places no one was walking, but that's never been true of the Winters Chapel corridor. If you drive that corridor regularly, you expect to see people walking. And so I do think that makes a slight difference in driver behavior. Whereas in the rest of the city, even around here, the pedestrian counts have certainly increased. I think people aren't paying enough attention because they're not used to seeing pedestrians here. Yes, we've done some stuff over there to make it safer, and we have some here too. Without knowing the specifics of each of these crashes. So one thing I take away from the high injury network is that on this map, it's that these are mostly intersections.
Yes.
And so I'm presuming that most of these, they don't line up with where the pedestrian crashes are. So I'm presuming that these are mostly things that we need to focus on traffic engineering for, some version of changing something to eliminate how they're dangerous. And I'd love at some point to get an analysis of North Peachtree and Tilly Mill, because it was 6 years ago, but we did, it feels like yesterday that we just finished that project. And so something obviously isn't working there. If it makes the top of these, like Perimeter Center West, which is right down the street, we've done no real investing in, I don't think from an engineering perspective, but there's been a lot of work done on Hammond, which it would be interesting to know what the data would have been before the work. Cotillion, that's essentially an access road and it has 3 points. I mean, it is an access road. Right. And so I look forward to much more detail from the staff and council figuring out where we go. I appreciate you doing the meeting with our Hispanic community, which to Tom's point is primarily a pedestrian community. At least one member of each household. They usually don't have 2 cars for each household. And then I'm curious about 285, because it certainly takes, crashes on 285 certainly takes a lot of our police department's time.
Yes.
But the data for that doesn't need to be in our report because we have zero control over what GDOT does. Do we have any control over Cotillion or the ramps?
Yes. So, working with the state is always, and I think it's been mentioned several times,
Right.
working with the state is always
An adventure.
a conversation to
Yeah.
have.
An adventure.
I think it was wise for the city to take 285 out of that,
Yes.
partly because the crashes are so numerous that they would
Yes.
have washed out local
Yes.
concentrations and local focus.
Right.
And there's very little that the state can do over, or the city can do over an interstate.
Okay.
That being said, this GDOT's safety staff are passionate. They are dedicated and they're out in the field almost every day, both at the district and state headquarters level. And it is hard. They have a lot more that they have to juggle in terms of thinking about the bigger questions of regional mobility, freight movement and other questions. But we work with them on numerous projects. We do walks on roads with them and get input from them. And we would certainly encourage the city to continue to have conversations over specific issues that fall within local purview.
So one question that might be best for Michael Smith or Eric, which is that about 2017, 18 is when some of the construction began on 285 in earnest. And I did, in dialoguing, I had our police department pull data for the last couple of years to see the impact of crashes. It was a little murky. It wasn't as clear as I thought it would be.
Yep.
But I'm wondering if in preparation for whatever GDOT's going to do next, if we ought to look backwards before the construction to see if some of these 3 dots are related to the construction and the complications of 285.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
We would certainly encourage the city to continue that. One of the reasons we use 5-year increment data and we build high entry networks is because it washes out a lot of that murkiness. Time
Right.
change. We've just ended our first kind of 2 weeks of big autumn crashes that we
Right.
see every year. Time changes, rerouting from traffic, daily incidences, and then longer term rebuilding and things like that. So taking a look at that over time really makes a big difference.
Right. Because unfortunately, the construction has been ongoing, still not finished, getting better, getting closer,
maybe
but then they're going to
finished.
start something else. And so anyway, all right. Well, we appreciate this and we'll work with
We'll
you.
have a page of notes, and certainly we'll be working with
Okay.
the city staff to refine this for
And
what y'all need.
We need to adopt this. Anyone? Eric, we need to adopt this? Okay. Yeah, if you can bring it back, we'll keep it on the regular agenda in case people have additional questions.
Okay.
Does anybody else? Okay. Next,
Thank you all.
thank you. Next is Brent.
This up for 'em. Off.
Yeah, you're not there yet.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The agenda item I have tonight is a contract amendment with Low Engineers for the approval of the 2 positions that were created in the budget process of a full-time recreation leader and a facilities coordinator. These 2 positions are greatly needed in our department. As you know, we've taken over facilities this past year,
and created a coordinator position, and that person is basically running around like crazy, trying to keep the HVAC running in all the buildings, trying to meet with contractors to get work done. So the associate position will help assist with those things. They'll be able to meet with contractors, open doors, coordinate things for the coordinator to then come in and make decisions on improvements and repairs to the facility. The other position is a year-round recreation leader. Currently, we have a part-time recreation leader in Andrea Perez. She manages all of our rentals, helps with programming special events as a part-time person. She'll be moving into a full-time capacity and will help also with additional programming and athletics. That will allow us to then take the part-time year-round position and move it into more of a field position. We want to put people out more into the parks to assist with rentals, athletic events, things like that. So the hope is by moving her into even more administrative work, it will free up the part-time position to be more hands-on out in the park. We also still have funding for our seasonal part-time positions. So we'll have them hired seasonally based on the rate of pay that we can pay them and the amount of hours we have available for the number of months we can do with the pot of money we have.
Okay.
So with that, I'll open it up to any questions y'all have.
So I just want to make a statement because I think it's important to start, which is I think something is not working very well. And we had council at our retreat a couple of years ago had stressed the importance of these seasonal positions for off hours. And I don't know if those positions were filled. I don't know if they were operating, but lately it seems like trash cans aren't emptied. Councilwoman Harris discovered trash cans right before a city of event that hadn't been emptied. Whatever happened at the park Friday night, there was no one. I just want to make sure that if we have a limited pot of resources, that we are using them in a manner that helps customer service on the ground. And
That's the goal.
And so if someone rents the park, so I'm not sure that's happened. So I met with a group earlier and they had rented the park for a race and there was no one there from the city in the morning and the lights were off. There are different things that I just want to make sure, and I want you to work with Eric before we vote on this to make sure that we are utilizing our resources in the way that makes the most sense. It's not our job to run the city, but we're the ones who hear from people when something's not going right. And again, it's not, if these are the resources, these are the resources, but we want to make sure that we have boots on the ground when they're needed. Is that correct, Eric? And so I understand that we've expanded our offerings and everything else, but we just need to make sure that, especially at Brook Run, but at all our parks, if someone has reserved an event space and someone else is there, or the trash cans haven't been emptied, or there's a general maintenance problem at 6 o'clock on a Friday night, that there's somehow some checks and balances. And so, we can bring this back. Anybody else have questions or comments? But Stacy.
So I had a question with the recreation supervisor, and you even said you wanted to be able to increase the offerings and the rentals and whatnot. Has there an analysis been done by, if we're spending X amount on this person's salary, we anticipate in bringing X amount more revenue in?
Yeah, so we did a rental calculation of our revenues this past year, and in one sector, I believe is in our athletic facilities, we are above the projection for the entire year by the third quarter. So we are definitely bringing in revenue above what it was projected for 2023. And that has been all in the back of our existing staff. So they are working diligently to try to keep up with the amount of requests we are getting. Certainly, to the mayor's point, we can do a better job of helping facilitate those activities on the weekends and at night. We ran into an issue this past season with our pay structure and what we were able to pay people versus what was desired. The pay that people are expecting now is much higher than it used to be. So that minimizes the number of hours that we can work individuals based on the pot of money we have. So we're looking at how to better spread out that staff to facilitate the hours we need. But yes, we have seen an uptick in our rentals and our revenues. That's why the new regulator full-time position will still continue to be able to do rentals, and they will be able to do it better. They'll be able to call people over 40 hours a week and respond to questions and comments and things like that for special events. But prior to them being full-time, they're in a part-time capacity and only had 29 hours a week to do that. So it should, to your question, help facilitate a lot of those problems and concerns.
Okay, but then do we have the support staff to handle the increase in rentals and whatnot?
That's so the part-time, year-round part-time position that we currently have that is being vacated for Andrea to go up to full-time, that will now be year-round part-time, and that will be less of an administrative position, but more in the field. Currently, she's more in the office doing rentals, but now that she's going full-time, it allows us to have that 29 hours a week for someone more in the field, to be more hands-on with the organizations or groups that are using the park. And then we'll also have our seasonal positions.
And I was a little unclear. So the additional like 29-hour person, I mean, assuming that that's can be off hours. It's not a 9 to 5 or 9 to 3. Like you can schedule them to be off hours when we actually need them, and not at noon, but at 8 p.m.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Else? Oh, Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just piggyback right off of what Stacy was just talking about, because that was one of my concerns, is that, you know, there isn't a real job description associated with at least what was in our packet. So making sure that, and again, to the mayor's point, that the expectation is that this isn't, you know, a 9 to 5, that you're actually work, because a lot of these events are happening in the evenings or on the weekends, not non-traditional, you know, office hours. So having that person on site for customer service, I think is important. So I'm hopeful that that is a part of the responsibility here. I just wanted to also just take a moment, because again, comments that we've heard about, you know, parks, you know, and I just want to emphasize something that you touched on briefly, is that although this falls under parks, you're also doing the maintenance on facilities as well. So the Sproul Center, the Annex, City Hall, the Donaldson Bannister, et cetera. So it isn't just parks in the traditional sense of the green space. It's also the city's facilities that and that workload there. So can you talk a little bit about the workload and
Sure.
and what is necessitating the extra positions?
Sure. So as all of you know, AJ Beck-DeBlasi is our facilities coordinator. We created that position a year ago when we took on City Hall as an additional facility for the Parks Department to maintain. There was a lot of deferred maintenance or things that needed to be updated that we just couldn't get to when it was not under the Parks Department. So by creating that position, his responsibility is all buildings, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, doing any repair. He manages all the lock systems for the Sproul Center, from roof shingles to gutters to concrete around the building. Anything that is manufactured or man-made is his responsibility. So as you can imagine, that takes a lot of time, a lot of meeting with contractors, a lot of scheduling, a lot of inspections for life safety, fire extinguishers, exit signs. All of that has to be done by him. All of our COs are done with him, with walkthroughs and inspections. So his day is physically doing work and also meeting contractors to get work done, setting up contracts, bids, that type of thing. So having this associate will help alleviate some of that needing to be in two places at one time, having someone to help him where he can meet with a contractor, where the associate goes and opens doors for a contractor to get in and that kind of thing. So we hope it will expedite a lot of this process. So he'll be able to schedule more than just himself to get work done.
I have a question about what you just said, but I think it's really for Jay or Richard. I can't see who's still here. Is this cheaper than outsourcing now that, I mean, we made a decision to outsource, bring this back in-house?
Here is the thing about changing from outsourcing to have this in person. On outsourcing, we are still at the demand of contractors that we can or cannot schedule. And you also have to have somebody here. So even though we had a maintenance person here, I would be coming over here on Saturday afternoon to unlock doors to get to them. This needs to stay an in-house position.
Okay. All right, thank you. Eric, you'll work on getting all the details. And thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Brent. And Jay, you're back up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is probably one of the more happier things that we get to do here. There you go. Okay. With the ARP money was put together, part of the end result was $2 million for not-for-profit grant funding throughout the community. And the way we worked through it was originally we had an RFQ, so a request for qualifications for vendors to provide services. And this is somewhat like the private contracting model. We don't have a social services office here, so we contracted with agencies that do. In the first round of this, we awarded, or the council awarded $1.3 million. And then we wanted to go through at least half the year, 3/4 of the year to work out the remaining 600,000. And what you have before here is a list of recommendations. We asked all 17 approved agencies to submit applications. All of them did in some shape, form, or fashion. Some of them just asked for time extensions on their current amount. What you have before here is the recommendations of staff on here. 10 of the agencies we have recommended for increases to their dollar amount and an extension of their contracts through June 30th of next year. And you can see those. Most of these are providing either direct services to individuals or direct assistance. In some cases, such as the Nature Center, they developed programs that people would not have seen themselves. The Art Center did the same thing. They reached out to communities that would not have been reached out to without this funding. And we saw good success with that. A lot of these, they overwhelmed with requests. I will say one of them, we are actually recommending a decrease, and it's no knock against that particular agency. Summit Counseling staff and our staff had conversations. Their problem with providing mental health services, they could do it. Their problem is actually hiring counselors. And therefore they said, look, we need to just kind of back away from this because we can't commit to it. So we're going to recommend reducing it to 50,000 and still extending it. They do good work. They would love it. But for them, actually even hiring the employees is a hard part. In one of these, we saw some synergy that happened. And as I say, synergy disappeared with one agency, reappeared with the others. There were 2 grants to Backpack Buddies, 2 separate entities, one tied to Jewish Family and Career Services and the other tied to Temple Emmanuel. In the end, what happened was the Backpack Buddies, which is now Rob Robbins and his organization off of Jet Ferry, where he's worked into a new warehouse. Part of what they're doing is the Temple Emmanuel part will now be the, as I call it, the parent organization, because he's not been around long enough to have a complete audit. So the funding will go through him to distribute food to multiple Backpack Buddies in the area. So it's one of those that we did get some synergy out of this in the end. We also have 3 agencies that did not receive additional funding. It's not due to merit. It's just we had limited amounts and we had to make recommendations at some point. You do have it recommended here, the DPT, the YMCA, and Dunwoody Senior Baseball want extensions into next year. I'm going to have to revise this for approval because I need also Clubhouse Atlanta and Stage Door to be extended so that we can complete audits into next year. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Questions, anybody? Rob.
I think I know the answer, but all of the numbers are kind of rounded numbers except for Sproul and Temple Emmanuel, which are oddly specific. I'm assuming that's just to get to the final number of the remaining budget, but is there a reason why those 2 are that way?
What had happened was that I'll tell you is Sproul Art Center requested exactly that amount. Everybody else requested in round numbers. And then we knew Temple Emmanuel was somewhere in that leftover area. They wanted about 40,000. So we just rounded it off, that make it work.
And then my other comment is just a general comment. You know, this is a one-time, or actually, since there's additional money, 2-time thing, but it's, I think it kind of speaks to the need in the community. The city won't be able to do this again, but I think it's important that people are aware that, you know, these agencies were able to use $2 million of federal government funding in less than 2 years to meet needs, and those needs, after this money goes through, will be unmet.
Correct.
I just have a quick thing about backpack buddies, which I want to make sure that they understand that this is one time versus or two-time money, because that's a big jump. And that, so everybody else that we're giving to is established. They've been in the business a long time. Just want to make sure that they know that it's whatever resources we may have going forward for nonprofits, it's going to be a much smaller pot. And
All agencies know that this is
Okay.
the end of funding.
okay,
They may come and ask, but the. answer
right,
is this is
that's,
the
but yeah, because that's a big part of it.
And to also help with that, there were two backpack buddy grants, originally 15 and 15.
Right,
And now they're both kind of under the same umbrella, which will get distributed to the other ones.
okay. All right, well, thank you. And we can't put it on consent because you need to, oh, John has a question. Go ahead.
Is the Malachi's warehouse, is that a typo? Is that should be Malachi's?
Storehouse,
Storehouse.
I've been doing this for 2 years and I perpetually have put warehouse every single place and
I
corrected
just,
when I.
again,
get
I just go.
Right,
I-
right.
That's me 100%.
Catherine.
I'd like to recognize Community Assistance Center CEO Francis Horton in the audience. Thank you for all the
He
great
wants to
work
come
you
up and
do.
tell us what he's done with some of our money. That would be great.
That would be great.
Right, I meant to ask him.
Thank you, Mayor.
Then you-
Appreciate that.
Right,
And
Thank-
thank you, council. I appreciate
thank you
the
for
su-
staying.
Appreciate the support that the city has given to CAC over the years. Jay was talking about, and Rob was talking about the fact that the $2 million was spent in 2 years. That does point to the need. This partnership that we have is even more important these days than it has been in the past, as we've seen 50% increase in number of clients this year over last coming to all across our services. Even just in our Dunwoody pantry, last month, we were up 23% number of people coming to avail themselves of that resource. And so the needs are not going away. One of the things that we've seen is that very interesting to us, and this is again across our programming, is that we're seeing more and more people come to knock on our door that have never knocked on the door before. And it's pure economy. We've seen that the number of people that come asking for help that actually have incomes above the poverty level is on a steady upward trajectory. A third of the people that we will service in 2023 have incomes above the poverty level. Those are people that have been working that same job for the last 6 years and living in the same place, driving the same car, shopping at the same stores, and can no longer make ends meet. So this partnership that we have is so critical to making sure that we meet those needs out in the public, out in the folks, some of these areas that we've been talking about tonight. So I appreciate so much your attentive to that. I'm very hopeful. I'm very positive that this council is going to be able to find some funding in the future as well to continue help to meet those needs. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your service to our community. We greatly appreciate you being there for those who we could not directly serve. Joe, sorry.
It just in passing, one of the, not on this list, but one of our, I ran into the chairperson of one of our local nonprofits the other day, and we can't compare apples to apples with the neighbor to our west. That the neighbor to our west does X for et cetera, because we have a different cash flow model, operating model. And I casually mentioned it to that person, and I said, well, maybe you want to compare the two different operating models and their revenue streams of what they have and what abilities they have versus us. So I said, yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, after this is over, we are very, very lean on our operating budget. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? So you'll need to fix the memo and it'll just be a regular business item. Next up is Chief.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So over the last 5 years, the council has invested heavily in technology in the police department. That's included license plate readers, gunshot detection software that we discussed earlier, video surveillance cameras, all to help us, the police department, combat crime in our community. So wanting to take it to the next level to be proactive in addressing these crime issues. And so one of the ways that we're doing that in 2024 is the council has approved Flock OS, which has given us a kind of a, for lack of a better word, a single pane of glass that we can look at all these devices in one place. Each officer will have access to that in their vehicles real time, so they can look up things that they need to look up or get alerts on things that they need to get alerts on when possible. And the item tonight is also a way for us to build a video wall into a real-time crime center or information center where we can have one of our crime analysts that could monitor that at times, and in the future maybe actually use citizens to monitor it as well, to look for alerts and look for real-time events that are going on. As we add cameras, LPRs, private cameras onto the network, it'll give us a greater reach to help solve and prevent crime in the community. So this is we solicited 3 quotes for this involving the construction of the video wall, and the quotes are listed in the memo. One is AVI SPL, Diversified, which is a company we already do business with, and then Fountainhead Control Rooms. And AVL SPI had the lowest quote when you consider theirs included the furniture for it, which will have, and we're putting this in our roll call room because we had to kind of use the space that we had. We didn't have a whole separate room we could do this in. And so it'll serve as this space, but also still roll call because we only meet there a couple of times a day. And that'll be constructed there in the room. It'll have 2 workstations and then, you know, stations for other people to sit during roll call as needed. One of the benefits of having this too with Flock OS is we'll be able to pull private cameras if businesses are primarily businesses, if they're interested in federating their cameras into our systems. Atlanta has thousands of cameras that's been federated into theirs, and not that we're going to get that many cameras, but we do have a lot of businesses who have cameras, and we've had some early discussions with several who are interested in pulling their cameras into our system as well. Also in the 2024 budget, we're purchasing 2 mobile video surveillance trailers that were approved with SPLOST funds, and we'll be able to deploy those in hotspot areas or high crime areas as needed, and we'll be able to provide those feeds back to our real-time crime center, our Flock OS platform, which is going to be real helpful to us as well. So I can see, for instance, you know, July 4th, we could deploy that in the village, and then somebody could be monitoring everything. Also, for instance, if we have a bunch of cars get broke into in a certain area, we could deploy it in the area. It has lights on it, cameras that we can control, and will give us a lot of flexibility in our efforts to fight crime and reduce it here in Dunwoody. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And this was budgeted in the 2024 budget. And the reason I'm bringing it forward right now is because some of the equipment has to be ordered. There's a long lead time. We wouldn't spend any of the money, obviously, until 2024, but this will give the vendor the opportunity to be able to do that. And lastly, the project manager for AVI SPL is a Dunwoody resident. So just FYI.
Anybody have questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hey, Chief, just a couple of, when you say the mobile trailer, what is in that? Is that a wall of screens inside a mobile?
So
Is that
no,
what that is?
the mobile trailer will be something that's pulled behind a vehicle that has, it'll have a telescopic
mast.
Telescopic
pole mast.
pole that will go up 20 feet, I think, or something like that. And it'll have cameras, lights, different things on it that we can use to observe what's going on.
I think I've seen something similar over the Georgetown Kroger parking lot.
They may have something privately over
It's
there.
sitting way in the back
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
I know on my commute back and forth to work, Racetrack has one similar
Got it.
in their parking lot.
Okay, and then when you say federate cameras, are you able to get the word out? Obviously, you got a network of all these businesses and private
Sure.
property owners that you'll be able to get the word out and have relationships. And
Yes,
they'll
we-
know. And
We certainly will. They're gonna construct, it's already constructed, just not public yet. We'll have a website where people could go and sign up to find information out about it. That's specific to Dunwoody. And so it gives information about LPRs or surveillance cameras or whatever.
right.
Yep.
Is there any synergy with what already, Michael Smith is in his room? He's got the traffic cam sitting over in that one room across from, in that.
Yes.
Is there any kind of
Sure.
synergy that you all?
We're
can-
gonna pull all the city cameras into this.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's good to deal. And then, this is only, when you say real-time crime center, so there's a video wall, but I'm imagining there's other components, there's, communication things, you're gonna need is there other equipment? Is there other equipment that you'll need to acquire as well, in
Not-
addition to the video wall?
Not necessarily equipment, so the Flock OS platform will allow us to do, and that's what will be displayed on the wall. But it will allow us to pull things like, we'll be able to have our police cars on the map that show the calls that they're on. So real information, real time, what they're doing. We'll also be able to, I don't think it's quite implemented yet, but we'll have live 911 in our vehicles, and we'll have that in the real-time crime center. So you can kind of, as an example, somebody calls in a really hot call. Well, the dispatcher or call taker is entering that information in a computer, and then it goes over here to the call to the dispatcher, who's going to dispatch the officer. Well, there's a little bit of lag into that. But if someone is monitoring that, then they can hear the call before all the details are entered in the computer system and go ahead and start someone that way. And that'll save precious seconds on those really important calls.
Anybody else? Stacy had a question, sorry.
I was looking at the contractor, the whatever the company set in. What audio is going to be playing?
It's the speakers in the, right. It'll be speakers in the room for us.
Right, but can the cameras capture any audio?
Well,
Or
it
Ring
can't,
does.
live 911 coming in, we'll need audio to be able to hear that.
Gotcha, okay.
And
Yep.
other things, we'll have a radio
Think-
there, so, it'll be audio for that.
I think
those sorts
some
of things.
Ring cameras capture audio maybe.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
some
Yeah,
private.
yeah,
Right.
okay. And then my other question is, a lot of the stuff, no, not a lot, but there was reference to the site readiness and what we have to do.
Yes,
So
so,
with the 300,000, is that going to include what we have to do? Is it going to
no,
be
there's a
covered with
couple
that?
things. There's a couple of things that we'll have to do, not very expensive, but they are things that we're gonna have to do, and we'll pay for it out of our budget or use asset forfeiture if we end up needing to. One is we have to run the electrical for it, and the other is the backing on the wall.
Yep.
The wall backing to support the weight of the monitors. And so we're gonna do that as well.
Okay. It'll be nice to see once we know what the total cost is too, just for the whole project. Cause I thought we'd probably have to do a fair amount of work, which is fine, but.
Right.
All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
You're welcome.
John,
Chief, thanks. Talking about those trailers again, is that proposal in this proposal or is that coming forward?
No, that'll be coming forward after the first of the year. We're in the process right now of getting some quotes and researching, because I went to the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference recently, and they had multiple vendors there with trailers, and there's so many different nuances. We want to make sure that we know exactly what we're getting, that it'll do what we want it to do. And there's all kind of possibilities. So we're in the process of researching that.
The one at Kroger, I think in Georgetown, is manned or could be manned. It's got a space for somebody to sit up there. Are you anticipating a
No,
manned?
No, this will not be a manned one. Those are a lot more expensive. So at Marietta years ago, of course, it's been almost 15 since I left, but we had one of those platforms, and it was like $125,000 at the time when we purchased it. And it works similar to what we're talking about. Just over the years, the price have come down and realize you don't really need a person there if you can monitor it through the cameras. But it's been very effective. I'll give you an example. We had three-way camper on Cobb Parkway in Marietta near Bells Ferry. You know, lots of acreage of just campers everywhere. And people were breaking into the properties and stealing televisions out of the RVs. And so we put one of those pieces of equipment, the platform out there. And of course, you know, you can't tell if somebody's in it or not. And it was like there for 3 weeks. They had 0 break-ins. But obviously we couldn't leave it at that business, you know, all the time. We had to move it around because there were other areas of need. Literally 2 days after it was moved, they had another break-in. And so, you know, it's very effective in, you know, kind of stopping those outbreaks of crime in particular areas. Welcome.
Consent. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, public comments. One member of the public left. I don't have any cards. Thank you for staying. The end of our meeting. City manager comments.
Yes, Mayor, we do need an executive session for real estate and legal.
Okay. Council comments, anybody? Go ahead.
Today is World Kindness Day, so please remember to be kind. We are a city of civility. We signed some pillars and just let's just be kind to one another and give space and grace. Thank you.
All right, I need a motion for executive session for legal and real estate, please.
I move to adjourn to executive session for purposes of legal and real estate.
Moved by Rob, second by Catherine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll be back. So cold, just in case.